Thank you all for being here. This is a ROSCO-sponsored seminar. Thank you. Thank you very much. Julian, you can't touch the buzzer yet. So I'll start again. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Everybody happy to be at CAMERIMAGE? Very good. My name is Niels de Montgrand. I am the Vice President of ROSCO's LED Lighting Business Unit. It's a bit of a mouthful. I'm also one of the founders of DMG Lumière, which was acquired exactly 5 years ago by ROSCO in 2017. For those who've been here for a while, we were at the Harry Potter booth before ROSCO, under the stairs. Some will remember.
That's when I met you.
Yeah. So a little bit of practicality. There is a QR code on the screen. This is because we're going to give away 6 mixed books. And a mixed book, for those who don't know, it's this little device here. It's a handheld, battery-operated device. It has Bluetooth, so that you can control it with our app called the MyMix app. And it is a digital swatch book. So it's the legacy version of a ROSCO swatch book into LEDs, basically. And we're going to be giving away 6 of those. If you scan the QR code and you enter your name, and at the very end, there will be some kind of raffle. And 6 happy people will leave with a mixed book in their hand. And we're going to have a Q&A at the end of this session of around 30 minutes, depending on where the conversation goes. So let me introduce the panelists, and I will appreciate a round of applause for those wonderful people that are here tonight and celebrating their wonderful work. So to my right is Dejan Djordjevic. He's an ASC cinematographer. He's from New York in the United States of America. He was VP of the International Cinematographers Guild, recently retired, a couple of months ago. He's just stepped down. They're trying to get him back, by the way, I heard. He also represents the ASC on the East Coast of America, and I think anything east from Los Angeles is his matters.
And east is also Canada and Europe. So.
Canada and Europe, yeah. He's an active cinematographer, I mentioned this, and he's also a professor. He runs master classes at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. Thank you, Dejan, for being here. Thank you very much. Then we have Una Menges. Una is a cinematographer. She's from London, but she has a tri-nationality. She's both from the UK, the US, and Canada. And Una has recently shot Lola, a black and white film that she shot during lockdown. Applause for Nula. Thank you very much. Then in the middle, we have Julian White. Julian White is from London. He's a gaffer. He's worked on lots and lots of films in the past few years. Amongst those films, The Midnight Sky with Martin Roux. I think you've shot 8 films, you said? 7 or 8 films with Martin? 7 films with Martin. He was a gaffer on Artemis Fowl from Disney, Cinderella, The Martian, and the list is quite long. Thank you, Julian, for being here. Thank you very much. Then we have Natalie Kingston. She's from the United States of America. She's a cinematographer, and she has recently shot Blackbird, which is an Apple TV series. And thank you very much, Natalie, for being here. And last but not least, an old friend, Jason. We've known each other quite some time. Jason is from New York City in the States. He's a gaffer as well. He's done films with Darius Khondji. That was a TV series, Liz's Story. He's shot film with Bradford Young, with Robbie Ryan, and Jodie Lee Lipes. And thank you very much, Jason, for being here. Okay, so tonight's topic is about the language of color in lighting. Before we start, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. I'm going to do a little bit of the ROSCO thing, because I do think it's relevant to the conversation. ROSCO was founded in 1910, so 112 years ago, by Mr. Rosenstein, and Ros is R-O-S into ROSCO and Co. for the company. Mr. Rosenstein was a chemist, And one of his very good friends was a Broadway lighting designer. And he had a problem, is that he used to color his bulbs, but the color would never last the term of the show because the heat would fade the kind of gelatin away from the bulbs. And so his friend came to Mr. Rosenstein saying, "You're a chemist, can you fix this problem?" And so Mr. Rosenstein started ROSCO, and that was the birth of what was called at the time the colorine and the opaline. And literally, lighting designers pre a show would dip the bulbs into the coralline or opaline, some kind of gelatin, liquid gelatin, and it would last the whole show. Then in 1958, Stan Miller, who's our current chairman, we celebrated his 90th birthday this year, and his cousin, they bought ROSCO in 1958, and in the early 70s, ROSCO created Cinegel, which was ROSCO's first step into the film business. And ROSCO hasn't stopped supplying the film business with gels ever since. The language of color in the film business is very different from the theatrical business, and ROSCO's been taking this very seriously. And so we're quite excited to share some of your on-set experience today about not just using ROSCO gel, but overall using lighting and how you manage color on set. So as you all know, there's many, well, color has been, the language used for color has been in many ways. There's names like Bastard Amber, like Congo Blue, like No Color Pink, or Stroro Violet. There are acronyms used like CTO, CTB, that relate to color temperature: orange for warmer light, blue for cooler light, plus and minus green, an eighth of green, a half, a full green, etc. So there's been a lot of different languages used and still are used today in today's world. And obviously LED came around maybe 15 years ago now, or 20, let's say, and they've kind of changed a lot of things. And so, Diane, I'll start with you. Can you give us a bit of a flavor of how this transition, or which is still happening right now, of using this legacy language, plus and minus green? I don't know how much you use that still, and if you do, please share your experience. And the whole world of LED with the Kelvins, with the bicolor units, or well, single color then bicolor, and then with the full color units, RGB, RGB white, RGB lime, amber, etc. And the hue, saturation, intensity language. There's X, Y coordinates. So can you please share with us?
You mentioned it's a new language. It feels like a new language, but it's been with us for a little bit. You know, the language of color working with LEDs. And for example, you'll hear HIS mode, you know, okay, or CCT mode, or you're going to hear, if you want a little more exacting, XY coordinates, you know, or how about the gel mode? I just wrote a list here for myself, but the fact is that, you know, it's become a new terminology somewhat, you know, even though it's been with us and the science has been there for a while. But you know, how we're working with our gaffers now, you know, when we're dealing with hue and saturation and intensity, et cetera. So these are the familiar terms. Yes, the crossover from the gel world, you know, and because that's where I start when I'm plotting and figuring out the color space on a project. I'll start with you know, with certain colors and that we feel what's the palette for this particular project, and what's
would that be with the director, the set designer,
with the director, with the set designer, with my colorist. Of course. Because I like to do tests before I go out and to come up with a LUT. But more importantly, after conversations of understanding with the director and what the intent of the story is, because it's about the story, and it's about coming up with a visual grammar that defines the idea, mood, and emotion. So how do I do that, you know, with color or with light and shadow? Because as cinematographers, we're dealing with the light and perspective, and it's not just creating depth. We're working with a 2D medium, but we're recreating the 3D world. And so how do we have in our hand light and shadow, and we also have color to create that depth, you know, that third dimension. So, so yes, I think it starts with the references initially.
And if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that the terminology has become something big now because there's so much.
Exactly.
Whereas back then it was
it's
just turn the light on and let's
in
work.
French, de rigueur, right? It's de rigueur, yeah.
De rigueur.
It's more common right now in how we communicate with, and also the other change is that it's not uncommon. On one hand, I'm working with my lightboard operator and with this language and with this terminology, but I'm also now finding not unusual, depending on the size of the project, of course, having the gaffer walking around with an iPad. And that's changed. We're in this world of wireless now. And not only with the camera equipment, but also with the lighting fixtures. And I think, you know, having gone through the first phase of COVID, that even expedited the wireless world because we were all discriminated in zones when we worked. And so there was a greater emphasis, you know, on pushing that envelope, you know, to developing wireless, not only for camera, but also in the lighting world as well. So those are some of the changes I've seen that are remarkable. And then you've got your mix books and you know, the opportunity to go through your catalog of those gels that we grew up with, or I grew up with, you know, working in photochemically. But now, you know, it's available. And I think you even have a feature there that you could point, you know, towards a source and identify the closest gel that comes closest to that source.
You can,
I mean, so there's a constant evolution here. And I think that the big difference is, I find, is the changes in our business. You know, the lifespan of not just camera equipment, but lighting fixtures, for example, was about decades. But now it seems to be months. How things are evolving and how they're changing. And so it puts more not a burden, but it's more emphasis or a responsibility on our side to learn and to, you know, what's available and what's evolving, you know.
Yeah,
and that's the excitement, is that, and I never want to lose my curiosity. I just want to, you know, we're just pushing the next stage and get out of that familiar comfort box.
Yeah, thank you. And what you said, I relate to what you're saying about. I mention often to ROSCO's executive team that we're in the tech business, and for a company like ROSCO, who's been making gel for some decades, it's a hard concept to understand, and things go fast. And like smartphones, you know, there's now Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and wireless CMX in the devices.
It's another world, and literally within the last 5, 7, 8 to 10 years at the most. You know, it's how it's changed so rapidly. But it's become, you know, like I said, de rigueur. We're talking about HIS.
Hopefully, it will stabilize at some point.
Right.
I hope. Yeah. Una?
So just to clarify, the question was, how is the language? How do we speak about color, and how are people?
I was going to start by asking whether you were an all-LED person or whether you like to...
I've been very slow to go to LED, and actually it's been only in the last couple of years that I've actually started to go there, because a few years ago they just weren't... I could feel something viscerally was missing, it felt like. And so what it would be a gaffer would bring me a light, and that would be how I would be introduced to something like your mini mix or the Skype panel or ones like that you could trust like that. But so last year I did a job entirely with tungsten and HMI and not a single LED light on it, which is awful for the planet. But now I'm just about to do one that's completely LED. But I come from a place that's my safe place is film speak, because that's how I grew up and understood, and it's also a language that no matter who you're talking to, people understand what Kelvins are and what all that is. So I think that stuff can keep changing. That the technology and all of that can keep changing, but actually what we're doing is applying doesn't change. So just playing with the toys of how to do it more easily and quickly.
And so on your shoot where you're using only HMI and tungsten, would you gel your lights?
Yeah.
And can you share a little bit on how you prep this ahead, with who,
well,
and then how do you implement it with your team members?
So usually it's dancing between tungsten and daylight, and then there'll be a specific place in the story where you're going to start playing with a bit more color. And so in prep with the gaffer and the sparks, we would have been looking for that color and finding that sweet spot. And so unless it was a film or a series that was very, very colourful, where you had a lot to deal with, it's quite easy to just dance around those places with that language, and then you'll give a nickname to the colour. It will have a nickname that's been developed while we're in prep, if that makes sense.
So you'd establish a language for that colour, related to...
And they know what it is. And then,
private joke or whatever.
Yeah, you're not getting confused with numbers or whatever, because that spark that was on the truck when you were doing it knows what that colour is, kind of thing. So, and it helps camaraderie as well. Yeah. And we work with Kelvin, I think, more. If you are using LED now, it's easier for me to kind of to have a shorthand with gaffers and sparks. And stuff like that. You
go quicker with that language, right?
Yeah.
It's like, warming down and go down to 2700 or whatever.
But it's only just recently that I'm actually feeling like there isn't something missing from an LED light for me in this visceral place. And so I think it's, when I look at...
You're talking about the quality of the light?
Yeah, they felt like there was something missing. And I don't know if it's people were working to bring the was it 4 and 12 up on the blue and the red up on the charts. And that's changed so much in the last little bit that it is starting to change. There's something about incandescent light or even a fluorescent with gas in it that still has something that we're not quite there with, I don't think.
Yeah, totally. All the spectrums, I'm getting a little technical, but they're drastically different.
But more and more...
Tungsten is a straight line, and the spectrum of an LED is like a big bump and a big gap and another couple of bumps, so... Yeah.
But more and more the gaffers are... they don't want to bring the big lights out because they've got something they can stick on the ceiling.
Well, they're getting used to bringing smaller lights out. And are you started prepping on your next film that you're going to be all LED? Are you starting to think about it?
It's a series, and we're prepping now, and I'm going to use. I think I'm going to use all dados and CLRS reflected light.
Okay.
Which I'm really having a lot of fun with.
Okay.
We'll have to have some other things in there as well. There'll be some LED panels probably and stuff.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you. Julian, I'll come to you. Okay. Do you want to grab the mic?
Hello.
How you doing?
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear Julian? Yeah, good. So, Julian, what about yourself? Can you share some on-set experience about this language thing, about the terminology? Prepping.
I bridged the gap, so I started without LED, and then obviously about 10, 15 years ago I started using it. I didn't quite like it. I liked the efficiency of it. I guess that we can run on batteries and stuff like that. But the color was never there, and a bit like Una, viscerally it was never quite right. It had a synthetic quality, but obviously that's got better. We used to put it through like an unbleached muslin to take that edge off a little bit. I do that with fluorescent lights as well. The thing I think is that we come from a different generation, so your palette's different, and obviously as you start introducing different things, you find it a little bit wrong at the beginning, but actually I think you tune into it and then you grow into it, and you can mold it as you want. I think the amount of color we have now is almost given us too much, may I say. Sometimes it's a bit like...
There's a bit of a trend going on,
choice
where
can
we
be
see
a bad
color
thing.
everywhere. Yeah.
Which is good. I think like anything, if you give, I don't know, you've opened a Pandora's box to a certain extent of color, and we have to sort of try and pull it back in a little bit. There's nothing wrong with it, but we're kind of, it's getting a little bit, not muddy, but a bit too much sometimes, I think. So actually, as in most things in life, less can be more. And then I've done one black and white film many years ago called Control, and I'm 100% sure we shot it on color stock and then desaturated it, but I'm also 100% sure that we gelled lamps, which was odd. And there was a whole discussion about it, and it came from the financiers more than...
Was that with Martin?
Yes,
yeah.
And the financiers were nervous about it being black and white. Anyway, so we shot it in color, but we had to continue the color theme throughout. But also I'm aware that if you do color gels, you change things tonally, which is a different thing. And I paint, so when you do a painting, sometimes if you want to remove the notion of color, you kind of squint at it, and it makes it into a tonal thing, which I think is quite interesting, because then you look at form and composition and subject rather than color, and color can actually be a distraction a little bit. So hence going back to the thing of having too much ingredient that we can almost throw stuff in because we've got it rather than we need it. But it was an interesting exercise in storytelling that or the other thing I was thinking about, if you made a film in color, took the color out, edited it, and then put the color back, would that inform you in a different way? So you kind of remove the
experimental.
the sexy bit a little bit, and then add it back in when you want it.
I like it.
So I like it. I love LED. I like color. It's made my life more interesting. Lights are still quite heavy, but I like HMIs.
It's always too heavy.
It's, you know, we can move much quicker. And when we're rehearsing, I can start lighting because I just carry a couple of LED lights and I put them around. You know, we can start the process much quicker. It's kind of there's less prep in that sense. But again, with all things that have more choice, they have more complexity, I guess. More people want to put more in. Knowing when to stop is a good thing.
Yeah. And what about within your team, with your Sparks, your board operator?
Yeah, I'd never XY, HSI, never.
Never. No.
No,
you
it's
just
really
good old
the other thing I'd
green,
say is
blue.
Color is purely subjective because we all see color in a different way, like taste. You can say it's a bit salty, like really, well, you know. So I like that about it. I like the fact that it's not too precise. But obviously, when you're trying to match scenes or whatever, you should do it. What we do is we do call it muddy fox, or I don't know. We name a color. It's just like Blue Mountain because we're in a mountain. It's, you know, and that keeps recurring. One thing I always do, the first question I ask a DOP is, do you want to use CTO or CTS? And that's the other thing is I always find the subtle changes of things make a huge difference in, you know. So it's that kind of, it's like cooking, really. But no, I never get into the finer levels of color. Certainly not on set. It would really be, I like that. And also the other thing is you can say, make it red, and then you look at the monitor and it's not red. And you're like, oh, so then you're finding there's the tuning that, and I get on the color wheel and I just go, and shift it around like that.
And in terms of matching different types of sources on set, with or without a gel, with or without color, even just white light, have you,
in the
is that
sense
something
of like from an HMI to LED, or?
Yeah, or LED with LED as well?
Yeah, again, with all the different manufacturers, different, you know, it's all a little bit of a, again, you buy sugar from one place and the other, it'll be slightly different. So you just go with what you feel. And again, you tune your eye to certain things. Some are worse than others, it's not, you know. I think, again, I think we're all getting fascinated about this kind of very thin definition of color. And in the old days, it was just like, it looks a bit too green, let's put some green on it. We didn't get to, I haven't used a color temperature meter for years and wouldn't, if I trust my eyes, I'm fine. But if it's that bad, I think it's really bad. You know, if you can see it, it's not good.
So it's gotten a little more intuitive.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a good thing.
And you know, when we used to say, "Oh, you got to use the 85 filter," you know, well, you know, just you know, why? We know the chemistry, and we know the fact that one manufacturer and another manufacturer, their reds, the two reds are not going to match.
Yeah, and I like the organic thing of color. That's the thing. It shouldn't be too precise, should we say?
You know, when we're dealing with hue, you know, with color, and I feel it's more of an intuitive choice.
I remember did a movie years ago, and we had fluorescents outside the window, then we were using tungsten Practicals inside, then HMI, and when they went to grade it, it was a disaster because everything was they'd try and go one way, and then it was just, you know, it was painful, which we've isolated now, but we could never really have told that by eye at the time, which was quite interesting. And then the other thing I was going to say is we used to dirty down, you know, you'd get a muslin, but you'd break it down, so color isn't just too pure, it kind of is a little bit more organic, I guess is the word. Yeah.
So do you think you're the cook that doesn't use a cooking book? Is that what you're saying? You're the cook that does not use the cooking recipes?
Exactly, because it's all here. It's a cycle that you set up and you put it in. You're like, oh, too much, you know. But as you do that, you keep learning, and then you know instinctively. Your grandmother never gave you recipes. They just like put a bit in. You go, well, you know, it's a pinch to one person is not the same pinch to the other. That's the beauty of, you know, color is purely subjective, really. I mean, we can all agree in some ways, but. No, somebody said the other day, or yesterday, said to me, could you be a colorblind DOP? And I was like, yeah, why not? Totally. You just gaffer just going, that's not green. I need a red gel, green gel. You know.
Someone on set needs to be able to see the color.
But the tone, I think tone is more important than color, I've got to say. If the tone's not right, the color's never going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mentioned it to you guys, but the term color, you know, people refer to just a green or a blue, or it's much broader, with the depth and the shadows, the contrast, tone.
There's a gel called gin and tonic, I think, isn't there? There's that.
Is there?
Yeah, one of the lead gels is gin and tonic. What color is that?
Yeah. try to guess.
You'll try
is
it
it yellow?
tonight.
Natalie, do you want to share some of your experience based on what you've heard today and
Yeah,
maybe your latest job?
It's all definitely, yes, I agree. It's very subjective. It's a feeling. I speak, it's kind of the same way I speak like in a color session to a colorist. And it starts with, yeah, like you were saying, it starts with story. And some films require more stylized colors than others. Some are more naturalistic, and you're just dealing with Kelvin and plus or minus green. And then some, yeah, are more stylized with more saturated colors. But I'm big on visual references, so I like to show, you know, once I come up with the visual language and where we're going and how it arcs and how each location should feel and all of that, it's showing my gaffer paintings, photographs, and that kind of stuff, so as a reference, you know, and having a plan going in. And I'm not really technical with numbers or anything like that. It's because it's visual. And then on set, if we need to tweak something, because color is all relative to the color temperature in camera. And so like you were saying, it might look red to your eye, but you look on camera and it doesn't. So then it's like tweaking saturation or hue from there. But I still, I think every project, it's a combination of traditional lighting, of tungsten sources, HMI, and LED. And I started shooting about 11 years ago, so their LED was just starting to come. It wasn't great yet, so yeah, I think I use LED more and more. But there are certain gels that I still love, like wheat gel. I use that on HMIs a lot for just a subtle warmth. And the classics of CTO and CTB and plus and minus green. Yeah, what else? And it's also a collaboration with my DIT, my colorist, developing the LUT beforehand. And sometimes, like on shorter projects, like commercials or music videos, you don't get much prep time. So you're kind of like finding a lot of this on set if you're playing with color. So it's just like on the day you're like DJing with color. So like I might take the iPad from my gaffer, let me just find it, because it's hard to, I can't articulate it. It's like cyan, but maybe it's leaning a little more towards the green. You know, we're dirtying up white light a little bit by adding a little green or something like that. Yeah. You know, so it's more improvisational that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the go and.
Yeah, which can be fun, like for you know, like for short projects like that. But when you have the time to plan it out and you know, and then you can pivot on set from the original plan. Yeah.
And who was the gaffer on Blackbird?
We had a few just because our shoot was so long. So
how long did you shoot for?
It was almost 100 days, 95 days.
Wow.
Andy Ryan.
Okay.
And Evan Lowe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where was it shot?
New Orleans, Louisiana.
New Orleans. And again, on the, you had worked with those guys before? Was it the first time?
No, it was first time. We actually used a lot of these little guys. We shot, our main location was a prison, and it was a real prison, so we didn't have a lot of room in the cells. So those little dashes came in handy. We would diffuse them, just stick them behind, you know, production design elements, and they were really nice.
It's a story of a convict that is hired by the FBI to.
Exactly, to elicit a confession from a serial killer. So if he does that, then the FBI will let him go. He has a 10-year sentence. So he forms this weird, dark, creepy, awkward relationship, fake relationship, but it's, I mean, it's real. They actually kind of become, not friends, but it's just, you know, he has to pretend like he likes him.
Get his freedom.
So it's very, like, character-driven. You have to see.
So is it a lot of fluorescent environments? I'm guessing prison,
by the way,
right?
it's based on a true story. So you
okay.
Yes, a lot of fluorescence, a lot of mixing of color temperatures. So a lot of mixing, like especially in the prison, mixing of fluorescence, daylight. Each cell had a window. Tungsten light. Each cell had a practical tungsten lamp.
Okay.
So not much stylized in terms of color there. We had a couple sequences that were flashbacks that we played with color, but more or less very naturalistic lighting, yeah.
It must get quite boring as well, because you're having to use the same aperture to go through the same, you know, it's kind of how you mix that up a little bit.
Yeah. Sometimes you're like, I want to change it up, but you can't, because it has to be consistent. Yeah, it's a prison, so, you know.
Yeah. It's hard to make it happy and colorful.
Yeah.
And mixing those different types of lights, white lights, you know, from the fluorescent, the daylight, the tungsten, was it okay? I mean, did you want to sometimes correct things, or did you have to correct things to make it the way you wanted it to look, as
Yeah,
opposed to
yeah,
the way
definitely.
it would have looked in reality?
You know, because sometimes, like, not all HMI, like some HMIs, like one unit might lean a little towards magenta and one is towards green a little. So it's making those consistent. But I really wanted to embrace that grittiness and the color contamination of all of those different
You wanted the odd mix to look
exactly.
real.
Like that defined the look of that location. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Exciting. Jason.
Hello.
Hi. What about you? Are you all LED? You still using the old big guys in the truck? What's your do you have a style? Do you have preferences? How do you set your list?
I absolutely use LEDs, big incandescent, and big HMIs still. There's always a mix of all three, and I forget how much. I think of myself now, and I was very late to coming to the LED world. I wouldn't say, maybe I might have been a little resistant to it.
Who turned you?
Well,
come on, give us a name.
I stayed, it started with light ribbon and finding uses for that, right? And then progressed into, the sky panels were around for a long time before I finally said, let me try one of these for whatever. And then Niels and I met through Robbie Ryan, when Robbie came to New York to do the Meyerowitz stories, Noah Baumbach film. And Robbie was like, I think put us in an email, and next thing I know, there was a batch of lights coming from France, and I knew the answer. They never left. So that's what I think probably really drew me in, but it was a progression. But I do forget. I think of myself, and there are films that I lean heavy to the LED. One for the control of the intensity without affecting the color. So I want to control both. I want to be able to control the both to the minute details, and pick apart those minute differences that might be happening between two sources, and make them, a lot of times, make them neutral.
Do you find that in the lower intensities more than?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With there's certain types of lights out there and manufacturers out there that there's a big shift, a color shift at the low intensities. I spent last year shooting on two different projects, Sony Venice at 6400 ASA. So low light to me is, and we shot it at 2, and with usually no ND in the camera. So we were like, you would walk into some of these sets and have to stand for a moment before you kind of walk, because you couldn't see anything. But I want to control those tiny details. So usually what's near the camera tends to be LEDs, especially when we're in a controlled environment. But then I forget, I just watched The Good Nurse, which I did with Jodie last year, and I forgot how much we did use big mole beams coming through windows on location, incandescent mole beams, which I love. And there's certain scenes in there that the warmth of an incandescent unit and the quality of it, of a mole beam, it doesn't, and I've been asking for it for years from the LED world.
We're trying.
When is that happening, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's an influence in aesthetic. The LED lights, it's a soft lighting, a lot of soft lighting.
Yeah, true.
And I remember when I started in the business, I was with an old timer, with my first gaffer, and just let's light with hard lights, and it was almost like working with reversal film.
Yeah.
There was no margin of error. You really had to know where to put the light. Otherwise, you'd get the most ugly shadows. But I just feel that, you know, for me, I like working hard soft, and it depends on the subject matter. On mole beams, I love them, and I do feel that incandescent with the full spectrum of light, you get that warmth, you know, and I love the skin tone qualities there. But it has to do really the demands of the scene, you know. For me, it's even in night scenes, in large night scenes when I'm dealing with a lot of real estate, I'm still going to go with my HMIs and my big sources and Parkans. But you know, on other times when the budget was a question, you know, we've thrown a big HMI, I mean a LED up there on the Condor. And,
I actually think they've revolutionized night work actually.
Right, right. But I had, in one particular scene, I had a lot of, when I said a lot of real estate, it was an ATV chase, you know, through the woods, you know.
Big guns.
So I really needed a punch. I needed a lot of punch. And for me, I think that's one of the challenges is, you know, I like to see an LED light that can provide hard source that I like and that I can cut well, because I still feel, there's still a deviation there in the cut, and I still feel there's a halation in the cut, you know. It's not clean, you know. So, but, you know, I work with both, you know, LEDs and hard.
Yeah.
I agree. I miss the hard light these days.
But you can link that back to when you're talking about the tone being more important. We need energy in the lights, and the tendency is for lots of stuff to become very murky, which doesn't give you anything, right? So go back to the tone. That's why we need that. You need energy in your. Because I'm still only using really, unless it's this reflected light that I've discovered. It's still just soft panels, and you know that you'll use for certain things, but not for that magic that's coming through a window or something like that you can actually feel it.
Texture. Yeah.
Texture, yeah. We hear a lot about the texture of a tungsten.
Texture, yeah.
I like to create texture, like little hard pops of. I'm on a reflected light kick as well, and I keep like a bag of fabrics, like sequins of different colors, like gold or like incandescent green, and just have like a pop of, you know, but feels naturalistic for the scene, or maybe it doesn't, maybe it's stylized, but you know, maybe it's like a warm pop of hard.
As reflectors?
Yeah, so I'll just lay over like a sequin fabric over like a 4x4 bounce and skip bounce it with a Lico or something.
I hate to say, I used to go to the garment district and get different colors.
Exactly.
I was going to ask, where do you get your fabric?
Of linens, of different colors, of ambers or velvet, etc. And I would use it instead of a gel, bounce a light.
But the first thing I do when I go abroad is go to the textile.
So again, it's just using different
or
brush
a hardware
strokes.
store for funny glass.
Exactly. No, I think the night stuff is really great. I you know, being able to bring stuff down to like 3 or 4%, maintain color, etc. is fantastic. I know what you mean about the hard guns, because you've got big real estate, but certainly if we can, you know, create believable night work, it's changed it a huge.
But even in day exteriors, I like to mix it up again, depending on the story. I mean, I recently did a film called The Virtuoso, and it was a challenging location. I went to, it was in Northern California with Anthony Hopkins, and the director says, "We're shooting at my sister's place. It's a ranch." I said, "Oh, that's nice. Okay." So I walk in there, and it's all white room overlooking this most bucolic place. But meanwhile, Hopkins' character is supposed to play this very mercenary, dark, evil figure. He's an agent for assassins. And so we had to convert that room. So I said, well, it's going to be that meeting with the production designer. And let's go mushroom on the walls. And I don't want to see that beautiful view out the window. I'm gonna cover it up. And by the way, the director said, your source here is the natural. You remember the movie The Natural? The scene where Robert Redford walks in and sees the head of the Chicago Cubs. He goes into the office and it's very dark. He says, "Why is it so dark?" Well, apparently that owner had a bad childhood experience, and he prefers to be in the dark, okay? So that was the only cue and reference that I got when I got to the location. The director said, I want it to look like very similar to that. So with a large source LED, but leaving an opening for hard lights, and I like to work with mirrors as well, because I really feel, to get those spectral kicks, you know? So we had, again, hard-soft combination that worked, but also I was able to dial in and maintain the colors that we wanted. And also, there's one other unit light I really enjoy, and it's always on my kit, is a Lico. I always have a Lico.
Bouncing.
Just a bounce, yeah. And my middle name is Muslin. I love working with muslin.
Unbleached.
Unbleached. And
I have to say that the technology that can, how you can point your iPad at something and it can tell you what it can give you that in your light, right? That stuff that you guys are doing. So I paint as well, and we all watch light all the time, and there'll be just the tiny nuances of white light, whether it's daylight or tungsten, it's slightly different. It's been bounced off the grass outside, or it's been so that in my experience, gels always take me too far that way. It's too strong. So this is what's really exciting about that, is that I can have exactly that color on that bit of the floor and that color on that bit of the floor, which. Yeah, so that's actually, I'm looking forward to using that. Yeah.
And does any of you use a spectrometer? Do you have one in your pocket? Yeah, Jason? Oh,
I like when
Natalie?
gaffers have one. I don't.
I carry around. So I bought the new Sekonic color.
C800?
Yeah,
Yep.
maybe a few years ago.
Yep. With SSI and all those.
I've had 3 meters in my career, and that
Okay.
color temp meters, and that one is amazing. And I use it. I still carry around my meters. I thought it was funny that you said that.
Mine got stolen and I never bought that one.
I use my eye and I try to
EP got it.
challenge myself all the time to try to nail stuff. But then I try to be very particular. And if a DP doesn't want to be so particular, that's fine. But I try to be very precise and nail things, right? So just get things to essentially as even as we can.
And so you use it for color temperature?
Oh, for sure.
Is that your first
Yeah.
piece of
Yeah.
information that you get? Do you look at the spectrum, sorry?
Not so much.
Not
I mean,
so much.
it's strictly to me about what the Kelvin is, and
CRI?
if I'm feeling, yeah. Plus, if I'm feeling that it's too green, just to try to bring it back to match whatever what we're calling neutral or where we want it to be. It's like I said, I still use it. I still have it on me all the time, with the exception of my nap at lunch. And it's.
do you find your work mostly the CCT?
For sure,
most of the time,
definitely.
rather than the
and then
hue, yeah.
I will talk to anyone, to the DP and anyone near the set with the actual color temp, but then I'll talk to my board op more in bring it up 100 degrees, bring it down 100 degrees, because he doesn't know how many layers of diffusion might be in front of it that are warming it up. So on his board it might be at 4,000, but in reality I know it's 3,500 right now.
Right.
Yeah. It's one of the things I use a lot, color gel, is no color straw on HMIs.
Okay.
It's something in New York, and I'm sure I get a lot of eye rolls in New York, but the grips are like, no color straw. What is that? I mean, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, what does it mean? Yeah. So
It's on your local 52 test.
yeah, but I find it's just a tiny tint and a tiny bit of warmth, and I find it gives a realistic quality to the HMIs to bring it. It takes the edge off of it, right? And you guys brought it up to you on Lisi's story, and you guys actually incorporated that into the gel pack
Mix,
here.
yeah.
And then we found that it was really about 10 or 11% saturation. We would be somewhere around 10 to 12% saturation to kind of nail what it was doing on an HMI.
So you modified the gel on the mix unit
Yeah.
to modify it to your HMI.
So if we had 18Ks coming through a window, and then we had, say, a mini or a maxi in the room, we would, running to a board, and we would play with the saturation.
Yeah.
Just
load the gel and then correct it to
Yeah.
match it to.
to match it to that HMI, so everything was kind of feeling correct. Feeling real. I'm all about feeling real.
Yeah.
Most of the projects I do, and then it is wild when you get into, and especially Lisi's story. There was this whole amazing world that we built, and then that's where we started grabbing ambers onto 20Ks that were at like 12%, you know, so that color was something, you know, I may never touch again in my career. It was fun. It was great. Very.
And so that's the DP's direction at that moment?
We went through, we did it old school where we just kind of pulled out a few gel swatch books and, you know, over the course of lunch, just
on the fly.
You know.
Yeah.
That's it.
Is that prepping or is it during the shoot?
Because those sets took months to build. That was during the shoot as we were getting closer to those. Yeah.
I mean, I still work that way, where for a lookbook, you know, I cut out the little pieces of gel.
Yeah.
And then I put it, I'll paste it on.
Yeah.
And you'll have about 3 pages, and say, you know, these are the cues for this part of the film. These are the colors that I like, and then I share it with my gaffer, and we just go over that. And then either I can replicate it, you know, with an LED, or I'll get the gel for it, you know. So, but it starts still the old way, cutting out the gels. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do the digital version of that with like color swatches.
Yeah, with the color swatch. Yeah, exactly.
So I have a question for the gaffers. Like, how much? So traditionally, you would always prep your lamps, make sure that, you know, reflectors, bulbs, everything's the right color. And so with your LED lights, when you calibrate them, are they very different, or do you?
Yeah, they can be. I know that a lot of desktops have a thing, and they set them up, and they'll eliminate ones which are a bit funky.
Chuck it out.
But they wouldn't go, you know, between different manufacturers, or they would say they're so different, then we'd try and tune them in, and if not, we'd.
So you'd have all the ROSCO lights together and calibrate those all together, and then you can see when one's out, and you send it back.
Yeah. Or yes, try and work it out. Yeah.
That's what you did with the HMIs, right?
Well, exactly. You keep the ballast together,
Same
chokes,
process.
Headers, all that.
Right.
Like errant children.
In prep, we just line them up, and they all get tested.
Stay together.
Yeah. Bring the soldiers out.
Yeah.
And people think that LEDs are forever, but they do fade away.
Yeah. And gels, you know, that was the other point I was going to say is when you obviously using gels, is during the day they'll fade out, and you wouldn't really notice it, and then you put your pan glass up and go, there's a big.
It's getting tired.
Or fading.
It's getting tired.
Section. Getting tired is the word, yeah. I lied a little bit earlier. I did use HSI. When we were doing Midnight Sky, Martin gave me reference photographs, and I divided them into sections because we did this big LED array with, I think, 600 lamps between a ROSCO back projection. And what was quite interesting, he gave me the photographs, so I put them on through Procreate on my iPad, and I divided them into sections, and then basically found the RGB values of each section and then replicate them on the screen. I thought that was.
And that worked?
Yeah, it worked very well, yeah. And almost you could then start creating a whole, you'd actually create almost like a big TV in that sense. So you could actually, the 2.5 meter by this meter would be 1 pixel, but you could then start blending it quite nicely.
What scene was this?
When we did the, well, it never got to the movie. We did a whole thing with Northern Lights.
Okay.
In the Arctic essentially, but we shot it in Iceland.
And Jason, another question for you, and for others, by the way, not just Jason, but we're talking about technology. You have a spectrometer in your pocket at all times, so that, you know, things are evolving, LED, new language, blah blah blah. Do you think the role of the gaffer has evolved? You know, and the relationship between the gaffer and the DP has changed between before and recently, I'll say.
I mean, I can only speak for myself.
Yeah,
but I certainly, I did my first movie in 1999, and a $200,000 feature in New York, and you know, to 2022. I mean, and I said this earlier to a production designer, Jed, who's here in the front row. I said, I find one of the things I do most in prep. One, I ask for a lot of prep, which I get a lot of kickback from producers about. But I like to have some time to kind of bring it all in, and I like to visit the art department every morning. And I think I said this. It's like I feel like the art department office is like a plant, and it's like, you know, during my first week of prep, it's kind of bare, and then it starts to kind of, you know, break the surface, and then by like the 6th week, it's like you have, even though you may not realize it's there, there's a palette there there's references there. You know, there's like their walls are littered with, at that point, with you know, color references and tone references, and you know, I love that. I mean, one of the things I love to do, and I'm lucky enough that I live in New York, where we have some of the greatest artwork around, and you know, I can go to the Met for a morning or the afternoon and walk through with the DP or the director, or I mean, not so much that my guys come with me on these walks, but
you should bring him.
Or just myself, right?
Yeah,
like
you should bring him.
It's and the other thing that we have that I feel lucky to have had growing up in my career is a history of people that did it before in the city that I spent 99% of my time in. You know, some of these guys, the first person to ever hire me was the DP. He was the son of a DP, and he was the grandson of a DP, both ASC members as well. So I was lucky enough to have those people to not only work with, but also when I have a question to send a text message to, or go visit them, or you know, take them out for a cup of coffee and chat. How did you used to do it? I mean, that's usually how it starts, right?
You bring up a wonderful tradition of mentoring, you know, and the fortunate, I think, each one of us, I know for myself, you know, there were individuals that were, from that first gaffer I worked with, I would meet with that gaffer in a diner at least an hour and a half before call, just to go over what we were going to do. You know, this was my commercial day. I started in commercials, and but that was so helpful, you know, and there's a couple individuals I can name on one hand that were just very significant, and just passing on of over 135-year tradition, you know, of lighting, you know, so, and camera work.
I think I mean, I started loading in '89, and I think that the gaffer-DP relationship is more intimate now. So it was a much different world then.
And do you think the science does that?
The DP was.
You think it's because of the technique?
And times are changing, but I think it's that the equipment's changing as well. The one thing that hasn't changed is the gaffer's ability to understand complete gobbledygook. When your brain just fogs and you're like, you don't even remember, what's his name? What? Get the doobry, what's it? Because of that, you know, you've got to point at the actor and they know, well, they've gone and done it before you.
Oh, you want me to be your hands and your brain, is what you're saying.
But you know, it's like almost like a ape, kind of grunt.
That one.
So,
and it worked.
I got a question with Julian and Jason, you know, as far as the changes as in that relationship between DPs and gaffers. But as a gaffer, right now, do you find yourself, are you that person with that iPad walking around and doing that? Or are we still working through that board operator?
No, but I'll ask my board op to bring, and I think he'll usually come with an iPad. Yeah. He'll bring a color wheel, like when we're, you know, mixing, what did you call it? Kind of mixing live. DJing.
Yeah, just
yeah, you just bring it to the.
And if you can add working in the wireless community world, and that's changed a lot. Yeah. How we work, you know.
If I had an iPad, I'd probably break it anyway. So it's like the last thing I'd want.
I mean, the other thing is that's truly amazing is that the lighting department I'm talking with now about this job we're doing, they're saying we won't need a Jenny. And this is a big set we're shooting. And so there we have in the UK anyway our Albert report. So what's that doing to the budget? So we might be spending a bit more in lamps, but with power, what it's doing for the planet, they get a credit now, I think, if you're being better to the environment. So it's got all these knock-on effects. It's quite exciting that I'm looking forward to learning about.
Yeah, I kind of broke my heart when you throw
Albert.
A dumpster full of gels into the, you know, just trash all your gels at the end.
Oh, I love them.
And poly.
The only problem is, what do we do when we don't have, the gaffer can't dramatically go and turn the Jenny off when we're not getting dinner on time or something?
Turn your Bluetooth off, you go into airplane mode and that's it.
Exactly, yeah.
And Natalie, Would you say that the relationship between the DP and the gaffer has evolved, in your sense?
I think fundamentally, it's like the core of it is never going to change, you know. And I think right, it is like a very intimate relationship. And I love when gaffers want to go to galleries together, look at photo books together, watch films, like that kind of deep collaboration.
Why wouldn't you do it?
Why wouldn't you? And I don't understand when some aren't interested in that. It's like, why wouldn't we want to just try to reach our deepest collaboration? Because, you know, it's all about empowering those that you work with and getting on the same page and learning from one another and getting inspired by other things and from each other, and just creating something that you couldn't have on your own, you know, without this collaborator. So.
I think it's interesting, Jason saying about going to the art department. I used to do that, and I used to get so we'd be filming a room which was green, or whatever colour it was. They would try and get any bounce boards that we had painted the same colour.
Yeah.
Otherwise you end up with this. Right. There's a movie I watched a while ago, and it was so obviously just a white sheet that was in a room which was
artificial,
wood panelled, and
Yeah.
it's all those subtleties. I think that, you know, you have to get into, or you just, you know, you don't have to obviously, but it makes a huge difference, I think.
Absolutely.
The layers of subtlety.
Yeah.
Which you can now do instantly by pointing at the wall.
Well, yeah, exactly. To a point.
I think that relationship reflects back on you, you know, just being open and being embracing and emphasizing collaboration. You know?
100%.
And I think there's nothing with greater joy than I can be anywhere in the world shooting. And I always likened it as if we were like jazz musicians. And I know that you know that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know. And it's a wonderful feeling. No, this is a wonderful feeling. That, you know, if you we are a community of gypsies, but it's a special bond, you know.
And the cool thing is about what we do is, like, you can go anywhere in the world and maybe not speak the same language, but the language of lighting remains the same.
That's my point.
That's such a special, beautiful thing, you know. I have a question for y'all, DPs. Do you do live grading at all? Do you open that can of worms on set?
I like to pretend it's film. No one's allowed to touch it.
Same, I don't.
And it gets wrapped up and sent to the lab. And I prefer not to have a dip as well.
At all? So it's just like a data manager?
If I can pull that one off, get away with it.
Yeah.
And if there is a dip, and they come in the room with their eyebrows raised, I determinedly shut my eye and stick it to the eye. And then, because it's just a safe place. You know, I start with a lot that I like, and then it's gone away, and I can concentrate on this now, and the grade will win the grade.
Do you miss lab reports though? Do you feel like?
Yeah, but I get them in a sense, because if I'm able to tape that up so it's a can of film, send it to the lab, they're uploading the dailies. So actually, it's where my grader is usually, or someone that.
Where it should be.
Yeah.
What about you?
Another person that I feel is important for me with the gaffer is the DIT. I always ask for one, and for me, I think the DIT is the most. Yeah. And I have a very close relationship with my DIT. There's a couple in particular, but I'm of DP that I like to control as much as I can in camera, because I've been, you know, I worked a lot of television, and I literally had to go even on my dollar to go to the left coast and to check out and to ensure that the colors were exactly the way or the contrast or just the look was changing, because depending on who that the post-production supervisor is, and again, it changes production to production, but you know, I just feel I'd like to lock in as much as I can on location, you know, and I do color on the fly, you know. I like to play with my brushes, you know, and come up with a look, and then have it frame grab sent over to my colorist, who I met during pre-production, and we worked and we sampled a few LUTs, and then that. you know, that's an important, you know, again, that's a very important relation with the DIT, myself, and the gaffer, and the colorist. That unit right there.
I don't do live grading because it's hard to split my brains. I focus on lighting a lot, but I work with the DIT. DIT is very important to me too. And after, or at lunch or in between shots, then we'll go in and tweak things and make CDLs based on our, you know, from our shooting LUT and send screen grabs to the colorist.
I've had it on one particular long project where there were moments where you freeze, and then the DIT will look at me, and you know the DP just spoke and said something, and the two of us look at each other. Are you going to do it, or am I going to do it? Yeah. And it's so that relationship is super important too, and I feel like that's been the last 10 years progressively becoming
more integrated.
I enjoy it. I enjoy it.
It's fun.
And then there's DPs that don't, that are very particular, that don't change it at all during the scene at all, right?
But if you have your LUT that you've developed, and you're putting your look on it now, and you have that established with the colorist, then there's your stamp.
That's my stamp. And prior to that, in the photochemical world, there used to be Joey V. I used to get the call at 7 in the morning and get my negative report, and that developed a close relationship for many, many years, as far as when we were dealing with points, for printing points, and he knew where I'd like to have my points. I always like to have a good thick negative, that I could work off, So similarly speaking, now with the digital negative, now you find you're not getting dailies anymore, unless you really push. But you get digital dailies.
Oh yeah,
I'm talking about film dailies, film dailies, and it's a totally different experience. So so I get a different call at 7 in the morning.
I guess the watching of dailies is different, and it's everyone gets a Pix. I don't know if y'all use Pix or
compressed dailies.
Yeah, and you watch it alone in your hotel room on an iPad.
It was great when you had the whole crew to watch it in the morning, in a theater. But anyway, I'm aging myself now.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Round of applause for those wonderful people. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Very well done. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the sharing. So we're going to open the floor for questions. I think we have a couple of microphones going around the room. And we already have hands up at the top. People yawning.
Hi, thanks for this amazing panel. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for the insights. I just really quickly wanted to ask, because I also really like using my LUT, and not baking it in, but not changing it. And I wanted to ask you if you are lighting and especially coloring against the LUT, or if you always treat it the same. So basically, do you look more to the monitor with your LUT and then decide on the color there? Or do you decide on the colors on set? So basically, how do you treat color and LUTs?
Natalie,
I judge everything by eye on a calibrated monitor. And if the LUT needs to be tweaked, maybe it's like warming it up a little, or cooling it off, or taking out green or something like that, then that process is done with the DIT, and he creates a CDL and applies it to that scene or whatever, that footage. So yeah, it's all done by eye on a monitor that I trust. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but maybe I would add are you using, or do you tend to use cleaner LUTs that don't alter color too much, or are you open for color changes in a LUT because of a stylistic choice? And
I usually don't go too far, I mean, and it depends on the project. But I think the heavy lifting from the LUT comes from more the contrast for me, but it can lean towards a color. It just all depends on the.
The monitor. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and then I like to more or less work with one LUT, and maybe there's variation. So maybe there's a warmer version, same contrast, same curve of that LUT, or a cooler version, But I don't like to get inundated with like 15 different LUTs on the menu. It's just too much.
Again, I feel that the monitor is it's got to be calibrated to what my colors monitor is back at the post house, and much like when we were shooting film in photochemically, it's what I saw through the viewfinder, and that established whether it was going to fly or not, and that was again I judged. So what I've got now is a monitor. And with a DIT, we work together. And like I said, I like to lock it in and send a frame grab in to reference, to my colorist. But I think the key thing is that the monitors are they have to be calibrated,
oh, sorry.
Okay.
I was going to say real quick, just building off of monitors, like my DAT has their monitors, and then I have my own Flanders monitor, which I keep calibrated, that I travel around with me, just to eliminate other variables. So we make sure mine matches with DIT, and it's just a way to go one step further to make sure it's all matching. Gives me that peace of mind, too.
Otherwise, you're just shooting in the ocean, with colors.
I still treat the monitor the way I treat my incident meter and my spot meter, where it's I want to do as much as I can by eye, and then it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes too. It's like how close did we get, right? And then the last thing I want to do is walk back over there. And
the monitor for me is all about brainwashing the director and the producer while the job's going on. No, I'm quite serious. I learned the hard way, that I got to a grade and they wouldn't let me change anything, and it was shit. So get the LUT on the monitors through the viewfinders. It's about contrast really, and I twist, but I have a little bits of twist in the color, and so I will light for that. If I put a green gel on, a peacock or a cyan gel on, and I've twisted my blues a little bit, it's going to be over the top. So I do light for that. But it's literally all about brainwashing. And then they don't notice when you get to the grade when you're changing stuff, because you've put it towards, in the ballpark of where you wanted it. And, or you won't cry if they do change it a little bit, because you managed to get your oar in there first. So that's for me, it's not, hopefully the crew is part of their prep, is to calibrate all the monitors and make sure everything is reading correctly, and it would stand out pretty quickly if it was off.
I agree with Jason there. Jason, I agree. The lighting by eye first. You got to trust your intuition and your gut, and just it's unconscious and unconscious. The technical information. It's like driving a stick. After a while, I don't think about it.
Yeah.
It just.
It also keeps a flow. It keeps you near the camera. It keeps everybody kind of where the action is, right? And then, because the monitors are usually, even if they're a room away, they're a room away. And if I don't like a lot can happen in those 10 steps.
Right.
Somebody stops you to ask you a question, then and then all of a sudden you go, what was I coming over here to do?
And the environment of how it's lit is different between room to room. And understanding what I'm asking them to do is impossible because there's a wall there, or whatever it is, right? Yeah, it's
Any more questions? Yeah, we got a couple.
First of all, thank you kindly. A two-part question, and both pertain to sort of the color of light at night. One is your thoughts or preferences or selection process for moonlight, the color of moonlight. And two, how do you go about dealing with urban sources, especially with the increase of LED in larger city centers? In Tallinn, we're surrounded by this beautiful sodium vapor at night, and it kind of reminded me that that's hard to get these days. And I've had challenges in the past where it's a mix. So I'm just curious your thoughts about it.
Julian?
Moonlight is grey, that's all I'd say. No, I think that's why I like LED for moonlight. It's allowed us to give us those subtleties. Moonlight's never blue. I've never seen it as blue. It's grey, really. It's a bounce light. What was the other question?
Sodiums and
Sodium, yeah. I did a movie called Harry Brown years ago, and we had this huge, it was like a 1960s urban complex, and we were like, we can't change every light in this thing to match up what we wanted, so we basically threw all the tungsten away and started using sodium vapor lights, and it worked very well. And I agree with you, it feels very 80s when you go outside here in Poland because of the amount of sodium that's around, because mostly England certainly is becoming much more LED. It's lost all that kind of murkiness. But,
I think the question was, what would you do? Do you go and turn the LEDs off and replace them?
No, I don't. Yeah, limitedly. It depends what you're doing, obviously, because that's a lot of time and money and. No.
The Mini, the DMG Mini, is such a compact unit, and what we've done, because those LED street lamps are a flat surface, we've just gone up in lifts and just zip tie.
I've seen photos of that.
Right
I've
flat
done that
to
before
it and
too,
leave the backing and whatever, the guts to it all, you know, further down towards the ground, and we have a color that I sat in a room for 3 days, going back and forth with a real sodium light and then a mix light, and just we made ourselves crazy, but we nailed a color that we liked, that we felt was close to sodium. I still have the same board op, so we always refer to that as Amy Street. It was from the film that we were doing. And then when they see us, we went in with Bradford, and we had a problem because that movie, that true story took place in 1989, and I remember it. And I remember everything about that story. It was on the news every night, and I remember, you know, everything was sodium vapor back then. And we go to scout the park, and the park is all blue. They are antique-looking fixtures, but they're all plastic, and they're actually LEDs, and we gutted them. I got one. I somehow went and acquired one and borrowed it, and we took it apart and we stripped it, and we found a way to in a reasonable amount of time, doctor an LED bulb, and it was a combination of, because we needed output, but we were in a confined space, and we had to do like 95 or 100 of them, and then we used just a combination of gel, old school, you know. Well, I forget what was it. There was multiple layers of gel on there to get the color that we felt represented sodium.
So it was a bicolor LED.
It was for the output that it was one of these big. I think my guys always referred to it as a corn husk or something. It was just one of these. Yeah. So they tend at that time in 2018. Yeah. Those were blue. They would be like 40, start as like 4,800. Yeah. And then we would just come up with a combination.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the importance of collaboration, I'd be remiss if I don't. On a set, talk about communication, a lack of communication. We had a sodium vapor scene outside. The actress has blonde hair, and she appears with a yellow dress. Do we have a problem here? That was after about the 40th day on a shoot, you know, the communication broke down, you know, with the departments, you know.
And there was a question about moonlight. How do you recreate moonlight? How do you, right, the first question.
In the modern world or the old world? Or
I guess modern.
Modern world.
Yeah. Is there a trick?
Can I give you a formula?
Not really. I guess we would tend to go in the 10,000 range maybe, but then I use a thing called charcoal grid, which sort of destroys it as well, and it kind of, it's soft, but
silver.
It's a good thing, but I don't know, it's one of those taste things that you have to develop, really.
Yeah, it's still a journey I'm on myself. I've not found anything that feels right to my stomach.
With the moonlight.
Is it no color?
Artificial moonlight.
No color is a ROSCO gel, isn't it? You can find out it's a Lee gel or something. Oh, it's grey, like Julian says, but it's also got a tiny hint of kind of purple, indigo, something in it. But it's too strong. When I put it up, it's too strong. So maybe I use tiny bits of it or something. But how many times do you spend the night? You know, when it's moonlight, you're outside. You're going, oh my God, what color is that? How would I make that? So maybe next time I have to take an iPad out and
It's
get
the holy grail of lighting,
the
I think,
picture.
really.
No, but incandescent, I confess, I still look at the quality of moonlight, even to this day. You know, whether I'm in El Salvador at 8,000 feet, I was amazed, you know, just how bright the moon is, and that the silver gray it was. And I remember in our tungsten day, you know, with tungsten, I'll go with a half blue and a quarter green, you know, and that comes closest to getting that silver blue. It's not blue, it's a silver grayish look, you know, which is the moon. But again, I confess, even to this day, and I'm still fascinated to talk about curiosity, when I'll just study the moon, and actually, I just express that to all of you, just keep being aware of the details, you know, of light.
But I think it's the quality of the light as well. So like a big massive balloon, to me, is much more exciting than, you know, one that you use as a bounce, like a meteorological balloon, rather than a big giant dino kind of beaming down. But the old timers used to mix up. We were talking about this yesterday. Correctional gels, and I think it's like maybe when you're mixing paint, if you put all the colors together, you get a sludge. Maybe that's what they were trying. I'm going to try that.
Battleship Grey, I think it's called.
Yeah. One of my favorites was Chan-wook Park's first film in the States was a movie called Stoker. We shot on 35, and Chung-hoon Chung, the DP, we used all HMIs at night, big 18Ks, and Fresnels, and we used I can't believe I can remember this. This was 11 years ago. We used quarter CTO,
right?
And then he used, I think it was a old correction gel for, I think it was called fluorescent 4300 Kelvin.
Yeah.
And it might have been Lee 242 or something like that. And I mean, I love that film. It's one of my favorites. It was called Stoker. Chan-wook Park. And that combination and that film, because it's so deranged, I loved it. I just remember all of our night scenes out in the woods and harsh shadows of stuff coming through trees, and that color was wonderful. I loved it. I mean, and sometimes it's as simple as just a little bounce, or, you know, at that time we had Kino flows, right? It was just a Kino flow that we would use close, so that, I haven't used it in a long time, but that was one of my favorites.
I think we had a hand up at the top. Yeah, microphone, top left, please.
Hi, thank you for this lovely conversation. So my question, in short, is going to be, where does the reluctance of using XY come from? I was really hoping that some of you might enjoy that kind of workflow. I tried to implement that workflow on a smaller scale when I got smaller commercials, and I was really hoping that people on the top level are slowly transitioning towards that. For me, using that for scouts, just I want to remember how this moonlight looked like going through this window, or the mix between the moonlight and the solid vapor in this location. I can just keep that number. Or if you're on set and let's say your practicals are incandescent bulb on a squeezer, going for a brown lampshade or something like that, mixed with a window with a yellow curtain, being able to just read that with a spectrometer and finding these exact numbers. Let's say the talent is going to be sitting right here. I can just put my spectrometer right here and use that as the starting number. And also just because of how easy it is to talk to a programmer about it. Because it's the X axis, which is the blue and the orange, and then the Y.
I think it's a generational thing.
100%.
I think we need to work where we're comfortable and in a language that we know our sparks will understand us. But I think you'll find that maybe people that are learning with you or growing up with you and And given what was said earlier about watching everything everywhere and taking note, you have tools that you can go and find out what that is, whereas I sit there scratching my head going, oh, well, what colour is that? You know, but you can actually measure it. So exactly, I think it's right, and I think it's just that we need to work where we're comfortable and where we feel that we're understood. So I can tell him a Kelvin and then go about a bit more of that in it, and over in the what's it, and he'll understand.
I could see that being an issue, particularly now where we're dealing with virtual, and we're compositing, and we're using other locations, you know, things, you know, where you need some a little more some precise measurements there that X, Y coordinates, so it makes sense.
And I'll add to it, even though I don't shoot, but I'm a little technical on the lighting side. X, Y only tells you, sorry, a part of the story is that any light source, even a cheap RGB, nothing else, LED tape, will reach an XY coordinate. And then if you try and match this with a full spectrum LED light, like a sky panel or a mix, you're never going to get the same result. So XY is great for saturated colors around the R, the G, and the B, but once you get closer to the black body locus,
I had this problem. Our beginning stage, trying to match sodium. I tried to do as simple as
you can't. It's impossible.
XY, and it was nowhere close.
It's because it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
And X and Y is just a dot on a graph.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you all the information, all the nanometers, the wavelengths of each color representation in the light. So X and Y is a great tool, quick for moonlight.
I also have found that XY, speaking in XY to my board op back home, uses a Grandma 2, and he doesn't. It doesn't translate to the way he talks, right? Like it's not something that he understands. So even I have a basic understanding of it, and then I could go and take a reading, and then we speak in RGB, you know, WAL. That's what we find when we can. That's what we'll program these lights, and then I'll speak to him in that language if we're really tweaking something.
Yeah, I think it's just another way of link somewhere, but it doesn't give you the full story.
And then it's about the team keeping records of each scene and where you were on the dimmer board and having those saved and programmed. So if you need to match, and my brain doesn't want to keep all of these numbers, and you know, it's
the set is not a lab.
I want to know what time it is, not how the clock works. Yeah. So I think you trust your eye first, and then if you have a problem, then you can refer to the information that's stored in
the science.
iPad. Yeah, exactly, and I wouldn't get too wrapped up in it personally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when you say to the Sparks, is that the right color on that lamp? They go, yeah, sure, yeah.
100%.
Thanks, Una. Any more questions for these guys? No more questions. Well, thank you very much. Thank you again, guys. Thank you for being here and attending the seminar.